Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going through another simple and easy beat that I believe almost anyone can make if they just follow these steps and these tips that I give you in this video. Now, this is like a very basic, standard, sad trap beat, and I think this is a very good foundation to have if you're just starting out making beats. Obviously, over time, you want to have your own sort of sound and way of doing things, but I believe these types of beats are very commercially friendly and of course sound fire. So I'm going to go through, we're going to break it down, and yeah, I'll play you guys the full beat at the end. So here we are in the project. Obviously, if we're doing sad, emotional type of beats, we're going to have a slower BPM. So I've selected around 137 BPM for this one. Between 130 to 140, I wouldn't really go above 145, but you can go even lower than 137. It really depends on your initial melody idea. It's completely up to you. However, I probably wouldn't go between 100 and 125. Down below 80 BPM and such is good as well, but anywhere in that middle range is too slow for trap drums traditionally. Obviously, if it sounds good, you make whatever you want. But if we're talking about what we see most today, that's around the ballpark that you want to shoot for. So, as always, we're starting with a piano. This time, I'm using the Labs Soft Piano, very popular free plugin. If you haven't downloaded this by now, what are you doing with your life? We've got a very, very simple set of chords here with a melody on top. We're in D minor, and we're playing a D minor, C major, F major, and I believe that's an A major chord as well. The thirds are inverted, so if you pitch these down an octave, you'll see that the chords come in here. Bringing those back up, I highlighted all the chords in the middle here, and I did the Alt-S shortcut to strum the notes, give them a little bit of realism. I then duplicated the bass notes to give the piano a little bit more low end, and then I laid down this melody. If you pay attention to these top notes, which is actually the third of the chords that we're playing, a lot of the melody actually revolves around what third note is playing in the chords. And as always, I've said this multiple times if you've watched my older videos, playing notes that are in the chords in the melody, or the notes that are in the melody and the chords, is an easy way to get one if you don't have the other. So usually if you start with chords, you can just use the notes in your chords to create a melody, and vice versa. So as always, this is a 4-bar loop that just copies over. The only difference is the second and the fourth bar, and this F note is actually shifted up to the G as well. So the rhythm is quite simple and quite similar between each of the two melodies, but there are just slight variations between the two to keep it interesting. I have a very simple high pass EQ here to cut out the really low frequencies, and this is automated within the arrangement so that when there's no sub bass or 808 playing, that the entire frequency range of the piano is heard, because the low end is nice and round and smooth on this piano. I really like it, so that's why I've automated it here. So just with that EQ, this is what this pattern sounds like. Next up, I grabbed this sub bass one shot from the Atlanta Culture 2 drum kit. It's a free drum kit. There's super fire basses in there. This one sounds like this. Make sure your envelope looks like this. All the parameters turned down except for the hold, which is up 100%. And then I've also selected the sub bass to cut itself. And for every other bass instrument that you put in, whether it be an 808, whether you put like a acoustic bass in, or anything else that occupies under like 100 hertz, you want to make sure that you go to this wrench tool and that these two numbers are the same across all the bass instruments, so that when they're playing one after the other or within quick succession, one cuts off the other from playing so that they don't bleed into each other and cause any muddiness and clashing sub frequencies. So you'll see that my spins 808 here, we go to the wrench tool, that's also on 6/6. So this sub bass is just playing the root notes of the melody. Often, if you've got one really high root note, for the second half, I often just pitch that down an octave, because you've still got the same note, but there's a little bit of variation because there's one at the original octave and then there's one at an octave lower. So those two together sound like this. Next up, I put in Arcade. Now, if you don't have Arcade, there are a lot of free vocal one-shots out there. I'm sure if you go on Reddit or just Google in free vocal one-shot kits or something along those lines, and I'm just using the easier said than done bank. Obviously make sure you're in the right key, so we're in D minor here. And often I turn down all of these macros because if I go through all of them and I don't like any of them, you can just turn them off and add your own effects later, which is what I usually do. And quite often as well, I mess with this octave. Sometimes pitching it up an octave sounds good. Sometimes pitching it down an octave sounds good. It really depends on the track that you're making. But for this one, we've got a really simple pattern. We're just playing the F and the B. Now, because Arcade doesn't actually play notes that are of the pitch of the key you're playing, the key just triggers a vocal phrase. It doesn't matter if the note in the piano roll is out of key. And I'm sure you know that if you've used Arcade before, but if you haven't, I'm just explaining that. So the F note in this bank of Arcade triggers this melody. And the B triggers this one. And I think these two sound really good together. This F melody sounds like it's the beginning or the call melody, if you've heard that before. And then the B could be the second one and the response melody, if that makes sense. So if you've heard of the call and response sort of technique, very good way of making a full and complete sounding melody. Most of the time, all of the melodies in Arcade, it's just selecting the right melodies for your track and then selecting the right group of melodies and playing them in the right order so that it makes sense with the melody that you've already created. Now, if you start with Arcade, this is obviously not a problem you're going to have. You'll have to build your melody around the melody that the Arcade plays, or you can use it as a counter melody. It really depends. It's up to you. So many possibilities. But the effects I've got on this is Fruity Reverb 2 with these settings. You can pause and have a look if you'd like. Then I've also put gross beat halftime on this melody to get two different versions. I've got the original and I've also got the halftime version. So the halftime version will be slightly different and it will also be pitched down an octave, so they won't occupy the same frequency range. So I've rendered that out so it's separate to the original Arcade, and I'll just drag these over here so you can hear what they sound like in context with each other. Really nice melody. That's pretty much the loop as far as all the instruments are concerned. Very, 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 like, almost stupidly simple. And that goes for the drums as well, you'll see in a second. But it just gives so much space for the artist to write to. I sort of imagine this as like a storytelling beat, or like a beat where the lyrics really come through. And the beat just acts as a platform for the artist to build off, which is often the case for these types of emotional beats. So we've only got 5 drum sounds. We've got this hi-hat, this clap, this rim, got the classic spins 808, and we've got this kick. Now the hi-hat, the rim, and the clap are from Tri-Freeze's Atlanta Culture 2 drum kit, the same kit that the sub bass is from. This spins 808 is from Cody's Everything Must Go 808 pack, I believe. It's pretty much full of 808s. It has both common and unique. Common are obviously the common 808s that you hear in a lot of trap beats today. And unique are just variations on those 808s. I love nearly all the 808s in here. But the spins suits these types of beats especially because a lot of the 808s are either too short or too distorted for low-key emotional type beats. So the spins fitted perfectly here. I did turn up the boost knob a little bit just to make it hit a little bit harder, just in the pre-computed effects here. Make sure you don't do this too much, otherwise you'll literally blow your eardrums into the stratosphere. And just for the kick and 808, I did throw an EQ. This is the 808 one. I boosted some of the sub frequencies and I just notched out very slightly a wide band at 300 Hertz and took off the high end and a very slight amount just to make it sound a bit subbier and duck some of the really notable high frequencies that I didn't necessarily think fitted this beat. And then also I did a very similar thing for the kick, ducked a lot of the high frequencies because this kick has a lot of air in it, and boosted 255 Hertz, which is about where the punch in the kick is located. So if you want to punch your kick, boosting around this range can give you the desired result a lot of the time. Just make sure when you boost frequencies, you're not clipping too hard because it can boost the overall signal in your mixer track. But yeah, in terms of pattern, the hi-hat's playing super simple 2-step. The clap is a very standard clap pattern on the 3 and 7. The rim, playing the very standard accent snare rim pattern. The kick emphasizes the 808, but it also plays in between the accent snare as well. I've been doing this a little bit more often. It just adds a little bit more bounce and sort of glues the drums together like they're all being played by the same person. If some of the drums overlap and play at the same time, I find it sounds more cohesive. Now you got to be careful with this. Often playing the clap and the snare at the same time doesn't really work out, as you wouldn't really usually do that if you're playing the drums physically. But play around with that. You can play the clap and the snare together if you like. If you want to layer the two sounds, that's a completely different thing on its own. But yeah, just something to note. And then the spins 808, it follows a very basic 808 bounce that you hear in a lot of trap beats. And it just follows the root notes of the first chord progression that you saw. If you keep all the notes short like this, sometimes from how the 808 is recorded originally, it can cut off as soon as the note stops playing. So what I like to do is just Control L and connect all the notes together like this. But yeah, very, very simple drum pattern on top of a very, very simple loop. And yeah, the arrangement's super simple. We've got this EQ automation for the piano so that it's 0 when there's no sub or bass frequencies playing, so that you can hear the entire frequency of the piano. And then it just cuts out the low end when these bass frequencies come back in. You can see the sub bass and 808 is playing here. Here we got a 16-bar intro where the last bar of the labs is cut to bring an anticipation into the chorus. And the hook here, 16 bars again. The first half doesn't have the kick, so we have more emphasis on the last half. Just builds more energy right from the very start of the song. And then cutting the beat out and leaving maybe 1 or 2 instruments in on the second bar of the hook like this sounds really good. This is essentially the same thing, but it's in the second half of the 8-bar loop, if that makes sense. And then for the first part of the verse, I do this very often if you've watched any of my other videos. Cut the first 2 bars of the drums and then bring them back in. Sometimes you can bring the sub in for the first 2 bars when the 808 isn't playing. That's completely up to you. And then it basically just loops. This is the same as this. I've basically just gone and copied this over for the most part. And then for the outro, we've just got the labs and the half-timed arcade vocals for the outro. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content, hit the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video. That's going to be it. Stay safe, stay healthy as always. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy, and I love you.